This is how I actually left my abusive relationship. Hey, my name is CJ. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I talk about my story of surviving domestic abuse and my life after that. So if you resonate with that, then please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell to get notified every time I post a new video, which is usually on Sundays. Without further ado, let's get back into the story. First off, I want to apologize to you for not uploading this video last Sunday. There is no good excuse for that. I am sorry, and I will do my best not to do this again in the future. Now, before I continue with my story, I want to say that everyone's experience of surviving and leaving their abusive relationship is completely different. So my story will be different, and whatever you think of this story, I want you to comment down below. I will read your comment and respond to you. So let's get into the story. It was the year 2016. I was in my second year of college. It was the first semester, and things in my relationship, it had fizzled on a bit. Like the violence had come to a slow, steady pace. But my intention for leaving that relationship, that abusive relationship, still stood, right? So I had planned on graduating college, finding a job, and leaving my abusive ex for, another accommodation somewhere else. And because the reason that I stayed with him is because I truly believed that I had nowhere else to go. So there was a night, I mentioned it in one of my videos where I mentioned that I almost died for the second time. Now that event that transpired was when I actually surrendered to God, and I asked Him to lead my life, to take over, and I committed my abusive relationship to Him. So here's what happened. After 5 or 6 months later, my very first love, or my very first boyfriend, he reappeared into my life at a bus stop, the Rainbow bus stop. And I ran into him like there was no chance that I would have run into him. But for some reason, I ran into him that afternoon, and I had just stepped out of the Stop and Shop. I went there to buy some fruits, and when I came out, he had also been dropped off by the bus, the university bus, of which he was attending. And I was so surprised, like my breath was taken away. I didn't know what to think, what to say, and all I could do was smile and have a small chat with him about how he was and how I was doing. Well, obviously I couldn't tell him that I was in an abusive relationship because I was embarrassed, and who wouldn't be? Now, what happened from that conversation that afternoon with my first love, my first boyfriend, was that I had this insane and instant flooding of memories of the person that I was and the human being that I actually was before my abusive relationship. I remembered what it felt like to be a human being, to be treated with respect and love. I remembered what it felt like to be actually living and not actually suppressed and depressed and turned into a small ball that someone can just toss around whenever they want to. And so this insane, overwhelming, feelings rushed into me, and I cried after I ran into my first love. His name is Craig, and Craig is actually now my current partner, or my current boyfriend. So after talking with Craig, I got on the bus and I went back to my ex, and I can tell you that nothing was ever the same again. Now, I want to be clear that nothing romantic happened after that. I think it was just a reminder of the person that I was, the human being that I am, and not a boxing bag for somebody to punch whenever they feel like it, right? So I was pretty overwhelmed and I didn't know what to think of it, but I wrote down in my diary, this diary right here. I wrote down the very first experience of meeting my first love, or meeting Craig, how it felt. And I can honestly say that I was confused. I didn't know what to think of it. So I brought it to prayer and I asked God, like, what does this mean? Does this have any sort of meaning? Does Craig re-entering my life after 5 or 6 years apart, like, is it a part of your plan? What does it mean for me? What does that look like for me? And so I shared the experience of running into my first boyfriend with some of my friends, and I got his number from Facebook. I don't know why I did that, but my intentions were not to pursue a romantic relationship. It was just to, I don't know, somehow reconnect. But he must have sensed that I was holding back, and I really was holding back because I didn't know what to think of it. But I got his number and then I called him, and he immediately knew who I was, even though we hadn't spoken in over 5-6 years. And obviously he didn't have my number, I didn't have his number, and that's why I went on Facebook and I got his number. But there was no intention to pursue anything romantic. It was just, I can't explain it. I was still trying to figure out what the heck was I doing. So we wouldn't stay in touch like a lot. I would just like wish him a good day, or he'd send me a message and say, yeah, have a good day at school, whatever. But nothing, because I was still very much confused, in a place of confusion. And I didn't want to cheat on my abusive ex because I know how that's gonna turn out. So a couple of weeks went by. One morning, it was around 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was doing some final studying for an exam that I was gonna have that day. It was on a Friday. And my abusive ex, he was awake at the time, so he played on his phone. I didn't mind him, I was just studying, and he got bored for some reason and he decided to have a look at my diary. For some reason I didn't see him getting my diary and reading it. I was actually busy studying, so I think I must have went to the toilet, the restroom, and I came back. When I came back, he was all up in my face now, asking me who is this person that I wrote about in my diary. And it was just one single encounter that I wrote down of that afternoon of meeting my first love, my first flame. And I didn't even write his name down. I was just, recounting what had happened that afternoon and how it made me feel. Because that's my diary, that's my personal, private thing that I just wrote down how I felt. And I didn't have any intention of showing anyone my diary, let alone my abusive ex. And I did not even put it in a place where he would get it. I think I hid it somewhere, but but I don't know, he got it. I can't recall, but he got it and he read it. Questioned me, pinned me up against the wall and started hitting me, punching me. And I just said, you know what, that's it. And I told him that I was going to leave him that day. I packed a bag with my books and a little bit of change, and I told him that was it. I'm gonna come back. And he was like, fuck off, go. So I was like, fine. And I left. I went and sat for my exam, but I was a little bit upset because I was gonna sit for an exam, and as a person to another person, you would want to respect that and not like psychologically affect me and then make me all upset that I won't go and perform well at my exam. So anyway, after the exam that day, I wrote a very long text message to send to my mother, and for some reason that I still can't explain to today, when I hit the button send, instead of going to my mother, and mind you, in that message I wrote about my abusive ex, and how I actually left his ass like that day today. And how I couldn't take it anymore, couldn't deal with this abuse. I couldn't live my life like this anymore, and I didn't care what was gonna happen to me. If I had to go back and almost become homeless again in the streets of Port Moresby, I would do it. And when I hit the button send, that message did not go to my mother. And you know who it went to? It went to my first love, Craig. And I was shocked. I was at a loss for words. I could not explain what had just happened, because that message was like, I saw in my phone that I was texting to my mother and I was drafting it straight to her. But instead, I don't know what happened, but it went to Craig. He messaged me back and he tells me that he's gonna come and see me that day, that very same afternoon. And I cannot explain it, but he showed up that afternoon and he wanted to know what had happened. So I told him everything. How I had been living with my abusive boyfriend and all the shit that happened to my life ever since I moved to Port Moresby after leaving LA. He just sat there and he listened to me, and I didn't know what he was gonna think, but he was very kind. He was such a sweet, kind gentleman. He offered to take me to whichever house that I was planning to spend the night at, and I had nowhere else to go but to my father's house. So I messaged my dad and I asked him if I could come over just for the weekend and then find another place to stay afterwards. My dad allowed me to go. So Craig, being the gentleman that he was, he took me to downtown, was where we were living at. That was where my father was living at. So I went back to that house and I spent the weekend. And then I think it was Sunday or Monday that I left, and I went back to bouncing around from one friend's house to another friend's house. I think at one point I was staying at UPNG, then to ATS. Then, Craig couldn't sit back and watch that happen to me, so he offered me a place to stay. And this is like a couple of weeks go by, right? And I'm still bouncing around. So he offered to take me in to his mom's house. And I'm familiar with his mother. I know his mother knows me, because we were in Lay, all of us were in Lay, and Craig and I had a relationship as first love, first puppy love, whatever. So his mother obviously knew about me and I knew her, so it wasn't hard for Craig to, I may have been hard and a little bit, out of the blue, but his mother was very understanding and such a sweet, kind woman, so she allowed me to go and stay with them. So I bunked up with one of Craig's cousin sisters in the girls' room, and I went back and got the rest of my stuffs from where I was living with my abusive ex, and that was it. I want to be clear that when I left my ex, it was the intention that I had set, the perfect plan I might say, was that I would graduate college and then find a job and then be able, having the financial means to actually go out and rent. I'd go out and rent a small room. That was my intention. But 5-6 months later, after that prayer and that surrender to God, I believe, and now as I look back, I believe that God had a different plan for me. And him introducing Craig back into my life was part of his plan, because Craig is now the man in my life, and he is just so supportive, so kind, so loving, such a gentleman. He is, I don't want to say the perfect man, but he is the right man for me, because he understands me, he supports me. Like, I have never had that kind of support before, and I can't explain like the timing. It definitely seemed like the wrong timing, because of, but I can't explain it, and all I can say is that it is all the work of God. Because when you surrender to Him, and you may have the most perfect plans, but God has a different plan altogether. And I've seen Him do that in my life, and everything turned out the way it was supposed to, even though it looked freaking horrible, and it looked like the timing was so wrong. It looked like, I was moving on from one relationship to another. And I want to be clear that even when I moved in with Craig and his family, we did not actually have an actual relationship. We had a friendship of some sort, and it wasn't until come November 26th to be exact, when we had our very first date as boyfriend girlfriend, when he actually asked me out. And that was when I count our relationship from November 26, 2016 up till now. So it is going on now 7 years in our relationship. And I am so happy to be a part of his life. I'm so happy that he entered my life the way he did. And here's the thing too. In 2015, Craig he was looking for me on Facebook, but I didn't want to have I didn't want to have anything to do with him, because I was in a relationship with my abusive ex, and I had no intention of, spoiling that. Even though it was abusive, I had no intention of being with another man. I was actually tired and I didn't want to. But things worked out, and that is actually how I left my abusive ex, my abusive relationship. And from 2016 till now, I have been blessed with so many wonderful things that I can't even count. How my life has been thriving, and it's been going from strength to strength. And all I can say is that it is all the work of God, and you gotta trust His plan. Even though the timing may seem off, it may seem like from the outside looking in, it can seem like you're doing something that's like, is that really, but God's plan and His timing is so perfect and divine. We can't even comprehend it or even question it. So that's how I left my abusive relationship. What did you think of this story? Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought about it. And this is the final and 10th episode of my Surviving Domestic Abuse series. I hope you liked this 10 episode series so far. In the next video, it will not be about my Surviving Domestic Abuse series, but it will be something different. So stay tuned for that. And have a wonderful rest of your day and the rest of your week. Bye.